Hi, I'm Rick Green. I'd like to share a surprising story for anyone who's highly sensitive or prone to anxiety. And don't panic, it's good stuff. Trust me, I know, because I come from a long line of worriers. Well, it's not actually that long as my mom. Her mom was actually quite practical, but I was always very sensitive, prone to panic, neurotic. I used my one gift, a vivid imagination, to imagine the worst. And I'm hardly alone in the conversations our patrons have in our chat rooms. It's clear many of us are worried, scared, sad, feeling hopeless, sometimes to the point of depression or an anxiety disorder. And it's understandable, just turn on the news, violence, cruelty, depravity. So it's kind of easy to conclude that humans are selfish, cruel, dangerous. Not all, not you or I, obviously, but most everyone else. Well, that's what I believed for most of my life. But in the last few years, my pessimism and cynicism has started to evaporate, all thanks to hard science, historical evidence, and considerable consideration looking around at the people I know personally. I've realized that my dark view of human beings, which so many of us share, is mostly baseless. Mostly. Now, before I could see the truth about humans, I had to figure out why and how I developed this warped view of reality. I think it's the result of decades of exposure to unreality, to films, books, TV shows. The dark view of human nature was reinforced by the nightly news and church sermons, but it was mostly that graphic violence and scary stuff that we call entertainment. So I'd like to share one example that led me to this transformation. It's from this book I'll explain. And I hope this gives you a more balanced perspective of human beings, more optimistic, hopeful view that's based on reality as opposed to the unreality of a fictional reality. I refer to Lord of the Flies, the widely read, constantly republished, critically acclaimed classic, the book that still gets English lit teachers salivating. Author William Golding was eventually knighted for his contribution to the world. He even won the Nobel Prize because, quote, his work illuminates the human condition in the world today. If you're lucky enough not to have been exposed to this book in school or seen the frightening movie or the even more terrifying sequel, here's the elevator pitch. A group of well-educated British schoolboys end up stranded on a tropical island after their plane crashes, killing all the adults on board. At first, the lads organize themselves to gather food, keep a signal fire going, build shelter. It's a veritable Boy Scout adventure. But inevitably, the fall from grace as their true nature emerges. So by the time a ship happens upon them just a few months later, the boys have degenerated into violent, superstitious savages living in squalor. Except for two boys who are no longer living, they've been murdered. Gripping story, eh? This fictional parable was hailed for daring to expose the ugly truth about human nature. Beware the primitive savage lurking in us all, ready to pounce. Lucky for you, school, church, government, police, and civilization are here to suppress and prevent us from reverting into our natural, warlike, murdering cave dwellers. By the way, of the thousands of prehistoric cave paintings that have been found around the world, the percentage that portray war is 0. Unfortunately, some schools still teach kids that Lord of the Flies presents the harsh truth about human nature, when it's actually just human nature according to the author, a dyspeptic alcoholic William Golding who once admitted he understood the Nazis because he was like that himself. Hey, grade 8 students, here's the terrifying truth about human beings, including all your classmates and your brothers and sisters and, oh yeah, yourself. As a highly sensitive boy, this fictional tale scared the crap out of me. I studiously avoided watching the movie. Thankfully, I only wish I'd never been required to read the book, because I thought, well, this must be what happens. Luckily, I found this book. It's Humankind by Dutch historian Rutger Bregman. He's the author of Utopia for Realists, another great book. Like me and every student who read Lord of the Flies, a young Mr. Bregman found Golding's sinister tale kind of dispiriting. It was only later as an adult that he started to question the novel's premise. Is this really how me and my friends would behave? That wasn't a Dutch accent. Anyway, had this situation ever actually happened in real life? After an epic online search, he finally located newspaper stories from 1966 about 6 schoolboys from the Pacific island nation of Tonga who borrowed a boat to go on a fishing adventure, but got caught up in a storm and after drifting for 8 days, washed up starving and parched on a tiny uninhabited island. Boys, welcome to Atta. Over a year later, an Australian ship chanced upon the island of Atta. The ship's captain, a part-time fisherman named Peter Warner, had sailed to Tonga to ask the king for permission to trap lobsters there. When the king turned him down, Warner meandered his way home, doing some fishing along the way. I don't know if he had permission or not. As he motored past Atta, a lookout on his ship spotted someone, a human, running down to the shore, shouting and diving in, swimming out to the boat. And then another figure came into view. Out of the 6 boys, guess how many had survived for 15 months? 6. They'd all survived. One boy, Stephen, fell off a cliff and broke his leg, but the others set it with some sticks and leaves, and it healed perfectly. Captain Warner learned that the castaways had divided up into pairs and created and followed a work roster. They created a food garden, chicken pens, a hut, gymnasium with weights, and, eat your heart out Robinson Crusoe, a badminton court. They hollowed out tree trunks to store water, and they maintained a permanent fire. Before bedding down each night, they prayed and sang songs accompanied by a guitar that one boy crafted out of a seashell, driftwood, and some wire from the wreckage of the boat. Of course, there was conflict, but rather than ritually murder each other, the opponents would go to opposite ends of the island for a few hours and calm down, and then they'd return, shake hands, and make up. This was 1966, long before school boards discovered the power of the timeout. To be clear, Atta wasn't a child-friendly version of Gilligan's Island. In fact, the first summer, the castaways almost died from thirst. They struggled with despair. They built a raft, and shades of Tom Hanks, it collapsed. During a fierce tropical storm, a falling tree flattened their hut. So it was hardly a tropical paradise. In fact, a few years ago, a Spanish adventurer went to the island of Atta thinking it might make a great place to stage shipwreck adventures for rich folks seeking a pretended dangerous adventure. He lasted 9 days on the island and then bailed, saying it was too tough to survive on. But he was alone, working together while the boys hung on for 15 months. Meanwhile, of course, back on Tonga, their families had long given up hope and held 6 funerals. So when Peter Warner brought the boys home, the joy and the celebration was, well, you can imagine. The grateful king of Tonga asked Captain Warner if there was anything he could give him. Yeah, permission to trap lobsters in the area and set up a business in Tonga. The king, of course, acquiesced. Warner returned to Australia, quit his regular accounting job at his father's construction firm, had a custom lobster boat built, christened it Atta, and returned to Tonga. He also hired a crew of locals, a crew of 6. 6 boys. Yeah, the 6 boys from Atta. Anyway, screw William Golding, a former schoolmaster who once split his students into groups and urged them to attack each other, and screw the Nobel Prize Committee and all the literary critics who hailed this dark fable as a daring expose on the true nature of humans. And shame on every school board that continues to expose impressionable young people to Lord of the Flies. Anyway, I really wanted to share this example of why I've become much more optimistic about human beings. It isn't just one story, of course. There are dozens, probably 100 examples, and I've been doing a lot of that. Anyway, get the book, Humankind by Rutger Bregman. It's the most uplifting, wonderful read, and I know it's the worst cover ever. Looks like I designed it.